Hello, everyone. Welcome to our 8th Quartet Masterclass. And today we're going to be talking about how to scale engagement through impact communication. Today we have here with us Alex Dilme. We'll see that Alex, he might have some connection troubles, but I'm sure that we'll figure it out and we'll be able to deliver the presentation we want to deliver. And also we have Mikel Artero from Mauricio. And today we want to talk about how companies can change the way they communicate internally in order to generate more engagement with their employees, to scale engagement, and with a communication that has an impact in our teams, in the people, the community we want to impact within our company. Because we see a lot of times that we do internal communication the way we've been doing forever. Sometimes, like, we create a newsletter, we don't even challenge it, and we just deliver the newsletter. But that communication, the communication we have with our teams, is key in order to have everybody engaged, everybody to know where we want to go. And Alex will explain to us, like, the step by step and how we can change this internal communication, not just for HR, if not for all the company. So before we start, we want to probably give a little bit of context. We've been doing these master classes for, well, I'll say like more than 3 months. Today is our 8th master class. We've been going through a framework we created. And also, if you want to read more or you want to see our master classes, you can go to our website, getquartet.com, where then you can see all the other past master classes and also like a written summary of them. So I don't know, Miki, do you want to introduce a little bit the framework we've been working on and in which step are we in right now? I'm just gonna share it on the screen so you can explain it a bit more.
Yeah, sure thing. Thank you for the intro, Tony, and hello everyone. One more quiet week, and yeah, this is a special one. As you guys can see, this section belongs to the last bucket, to the last let's say pillar of our framework. So it's just like the kind of like the icing on the cake to just like complete the whole conversion from having an employee who's disengaged to having an owner who just acts and behaves and performs as if was, he or she was the founder of the company. So that's what we're trying to do. We realized that in our current approach to work, there's a couple of things that might be broken. And the reason being that we're applying some of the techniques, some of the methods that were developed for another age, for the Industrial Revolution, for that time where efficiency was more important than creativity, to stay ahead of the competition and to just bring impact to the world. No, so having this or taking this into account, we're like, okay, so we're optimizing for something else now. We might need to rethink the way we are actually organized as a company. So the first part of that is owner's discovery. So as companies, we need to really understand our meaning. We really need to understand our reason for existing, our purpose. It seems obvious, but sometimes it's worth giving it a second thought. And at the same time, we need to understand what values drive us and what capabilities are going to make a difference for us. Alex was talking about the example for Decathlon a few days back or a few weeks ago, where for Decathlon, maybe it's more important to have a kick-ass, team on research and development, whereas the branding team might be, a little bit less important in their case. For Nike, the opposite might apply. So that's first, knowing who you are as a company. Once you know that, you can attract the right people for you. Doesn't mean it's the best for everybody. There's best people for each different company. So the best people for you, you can start attracting them, and of course, building partnerships with them, because we don't want this to be one-sided. We don't want the company to be more important than its people. We want it to be, balanced. We want the relationship to be healthy and based on trust and mutual value. So that's the next thing you do. And then finally, you need to apply a management method that actually allows for that people who's a good fit for you to shine. And you can do that, with proper leadership techniques, with proper learning and talent development techniques. And one of the important ones as well is communication. You must really enable your people to know the kind of impact that they're having in the world. And at the same time, they should be able to have a voice in that kind of impact that you're having on the world. So today we're here with Alex to find out a bit more on how we can actually do that.
Cool. Thank you very
Fantastic.
much, Mickey. I hope that, as Tony was saying, I'm loud and clear today. So allow us to start with the impact communication. At the end of the day, the first thing we would like to touch base on is why is communication so important within our framework and also within the future of work that we see within Quired. The first thing is, and this is very obvious, right? Everybody's starting to move from a full office environment to a remote environment, a hybrid environment, which obviously poses a challenge to the traditional in-office communication, right? The impromptu meetings that you have, the impromptu interactions you would have. There was a lot of communication happening there that today is not happening. So communication is being, let's say, or is being challenged in the new ways of working. Second thing, and also third one, right? We do believe at Quare that companies need to move right from a, let's say, a command and control model that was basic, where they were basically trying to maximize the efficiency of the companies. That was the right way to win in the markets, by being more efficient, by being better than the other ones, because they were very stable environments. Like it was like operating in big factories. The bigger the factory, the more efficient the factory, the cheaper your product will be, and that's what will win. However, in a world that is on constant change, right, as it's happening right now, everything evolves really, really, really fast. What wins in the market is creativity and empowerment, right? All this agility. So to create environments that actually boost creativity or boost empowerment, what you need to do is you need to skyrocket. You need to improve communication. You need to boost communication really well. You need to make sure that everybody, people in the front lines, understand the direction, because at the end, it's not a few people that make the decisions now, but it's actually a handful of people, your full organization making rapid and quick decisions. So at the end, with this new paradigm, it's very, very important. Communication becomes even more important. And then the other two buckets talk about the type of change in communication that needs to happen, right? We're seeing how business are demanded to become more and more social, right? We paraphrase this talking about from business to communities, right? We want businesses or companies start to feel more like communities, like people that care about each other, people that care about the higher good, what we call purpose, about the values. So it's very, very important to increase that piece of communication within today's companies, right? And also, very, very importantly, right, we're moving from non-diverse to diverse employee bases, which means that a one size fits all type of communication doesn't really work anymore. You need to have different types of communication from different people. So all in all, we see, and we like to put it that way, like a scattered employee base, a remote employee base, a diverse employee base that requires better guidance. People need to be more guided to be able to make all these empowered decisions. That requires more belonging. People do not want to work for a business. They want to work for a community. So you need to boost values, need to boost purpose. And that requires people, again, with more context, with more intellectual challenges to boost that creativity or ideation. So at the end of the day, we don't like to call it communication, because communication at the end is an input, right? Your goal is at the end to energize the company, right? So we do believe that energizing at scale, throughout the whole company, not through a few leaders, throughout the whole company, is as important as ever. So before we get into content and into the impact communication, we'd like to briefly touch upon a very basic thing of communication. And I even remember myself when my, I think it was third or fourth grade teacher used to tell me, this is how communication happens. Very simple things, very obvious things, but the end that help us understand how we want to transform the communication within a company. Communication flow is very, very, very simple, right? You have a sender that has a message that wants to send to the receiver through a specific channel, and then the receiver sends the feedback back. That's nature itself, right? That's not going to change. Ever is going to change, right? But what we want to change is what happens, right? So let's look at how traditional communication works. Who is usually the sender when it comes to communication? And today, let me make this brief point. We're going to focus on, let's say, the broad communication, not the leader or the manager to employee type of communication that's going to be tackled in a future core where we talk about leadership. It's more on the big communication, right? Who is the traditional sender here? Usually, the person or the team in charge that generates the output of communication is highly centralized, right? It usually comes from either human resources or communication. Usually the message tends to be very results or financial driven, right? This is, at the end, these people, and we're going to talk about it more later, right? These people have a limited amount of resources. They need to focus on the important pieces of communications, and they tend to prioritize financial or results information. The channel usually that they use is either emails or newsletters. We're seeing now how certain companies starting to utilize a lot more town halls and stuff like that. But the end, the channel is and the flow are unidirectional, right? top down. There's no feedback loop as we were seeing before. What we propose at Quired is a complete redesign of how all this works, right? From one end, we want to challenge the sender. We do believe that it doesn't make any sense for the sender to be centralized, to be focused on HR or communications. We do believe in a completely decentralized, focused on leaders, impact communication model. Second, again, on the message side, we touched before upon the fact that people want to sense that belonging, that people want to connect to a bigger thing. And the people need to be empowered. So, focusing only on the financial results, focusing only on the output of the company doesn't make any sense. You need to start communicating in inputs, right? In strategic messages that at the end bring on emotions, and that at the end we like a lot, that talk about the impact that you are generating as a company, right? So complete change in the message also. In terms of channels, again, we do believe that emails and newsletters don't make any sense anymore, and that we need to start focusing on social platforms. And we're going to touch upon this later, so I don't want to extend myself here now. And last but not least, we do believe that, as Mickey was saying, we want to enrich that bidirectional loop, right? That feedback loop. And then the communication is not only top down and bottom up. At the end, all these things are to boost the business. It's not just because it's the right thing to do, but it's also the wise thing to do to completely reshape communication in a company. So let's take a brief look at traditional communication. Why we do believe that traditional communication is a completely obsolete model. We do believe that traditional internal communication is the perfect bottleneck. So this dotted round shaped circles that I think Mickey was making fun of before we started. But at the end, these represent relevant stories, things that people would benefit from knowing, right? And there's a lot of information that people benefit from actually seeing the values taking place, understanding better the purpose, getting better strategic context, even the outputs that the financial outputs we were mentioning before. So people need to know all of this stuff. But then what happens is that internal comms filters all that information, right? Can only process a few things because they only know a few things. They probably don't know that in a side of the business, somebody made something that's really relevant regarding, I don't know, a certain achievement, or that represents one of the values, or that brings the purpose to life. They probably don't get to know all these things, right? So they select a very few things, and usually when it comes to prioritization, they prioritize what's easy and what's very important to communicate, which is probably financial results, right? And what happens is that they also put it in a jargon, in this corporate jargon that completely dehumanizes the stories behind, right? You start seeing all these companies that instead of talking like people, they start talking with, like businesses itself, right? And they put all of that in formats that are boring and non-appealing and not, let's say, lively at all, which are newsletters. Even town halls can become really, really boring, and we do believe are a little bit of a thing of the past. So all this situation creates what we call a low battery or low energy organization. It's impossible to motivate your people. It's impossible to guide your people. It's impossible at the end to talk to all your diverse and motivate all your diverse workforce, with internal communication being what we call the perfect bottleneck. So let's look at the new role of internal communication and what needs to happen. How do we address this change? How do we address this bottleneck? We're going to talk about 4 things. The first one is the first thing you need to do is you need to set up a social tool. And now we're going to talk more about it. A tool that effectively allows everybody to communicate with each other in an effective, easy, lively, and ongoing way. Again, instead of starting from communication itself, it needs to start from the people itself, from people to people, without moving through internal communications. The second thing, which is very important, as the communication, your role needs to be the enabler. You need to set the rules of the game. You need to enable the communication to happen. You don't need to control the output. You need to control you don't need to control the output itself. You need to support and nudge the inputs. So you need to say what type of communication is allowed within the company. So for example, do you want to have political discussions within your company? Yes or no? Do you want to talk about diversity? Yes or no? What is the right tone? So these are the things that communication, as we like to put, as a community manager, needs to work on instead of creating the content themselves. The third thing is so communication needs to create certain parts of the content, and we're going to talk about it a little more, but not all the content. You need to create content that nudges conversation. So imagine that as a company, for you, it's very important to boost diversity, right? So you'll create pieces of content that encourage dialogues about diversity, and at the end, generate all this thinking and all this processing but not all the content itself. You generate nudges that at the end make people to talk about, in this case, about diversity. And the last thing is, and we'll talk about it, you need leaders to pitch in. Leaders are the most important piece to generate this change, right? Instead of, internal communication driven communication models from, social driven communication models. So let's start with the first one. This is probably the biggest game changer that we've seen, right? The first one is you need to create social tools. Now we're going to see an example of Workplace, which is the one we've been using in my company for some time. But there's also Slacks, Google+, there's plenty of them. But the first thing is you need to create the pitch where all this new form of communication, we can call it peer-to-peer communication, can actually happen. And we're going to show you a quick video of how Workplace works to give a little bit of a flavor to this.
As your business evolves for the future, your teams and culture should change and grow with it. The key to achieving this is connection. At Facebook, we know a lot about connecting people. That's why we built Workplace, to connect the world of work and turn companies into communities. And just like Facebook and Messenger, Workplace is intuitive and simple to use. Workplace lets you connect directly with your employees, meaning you can always find and engage the right people at the right time. It also lets you broadcast live to your entire company to get real-time comments and reactions. Workplace isn't just about increasing engagement, it's about boosting culture too. Groups allow you to share ideas, celebrate contributions, and connect on projects with meaningful collaboration. They're a shared space where people and teams feel connected, informed, and supported. When every team, manager, or partner is connected, great things happen. Workplace gives you confidence that your teams are working together, solving problems and striving for success. With Knowledge Library, all your company and team's resources can sit in one place. Workplace seamlessly integrates with your existing tools and adapts with your organization. It gives you the control, security, and visibility your company needs. No matter what type of work you do, Workplace is designed for everyone, whether you're behind a desk or in front of customers. With 5 million paid users around the world, Workplace has connected companies in a big way. Just imagine.
Okay, let's stop it here. I think that we were getting into the Workplace sales pitch here, and it's enough for the advertisement. The key point here is that we want to create a platform, a place where everybody can speak to each other in a remote environment, right? Where it's very easy for people to share their stories. So take it like that. It doesn't make any sense that the financial results are shared by the HR person within the company. The HR person has to prepare a newsletter to explain or to recap on 3 stories that clarify your values or 3 stories that bring your purpose to life. It's very difficult to do. It's very non-efficient. And again, you will lose the authenticity of the story itself. Instead, what we do believe is the chief financial officer should be the one being able, to create a small webinar or a small post explaining, the recent financial results, or in terms of human resources, to communicate the new, benefits policy, you name it. Or that the person working in a certain field or in sales can explain how he or she, benefited a certain customer doing A, B, or C. It's a way more fluent, way more efficient way of communicating. As internal communication or as a company, all you need to do, or at least the first step, is to create and design that platform. And let me tell you, this is extremely cheap. I think the cost of these platforms are between $3 and $6 per user per month. So again, it's hard to build it. It's hard to change the habits, and we're going to talk more about this now. But you need to completely rethink communication. So to make it flow and to make it happen across all the organization. The other thing we want to talk about is so your role, or the role of a company, is to, at the end, align people, right? You want to make sure, as we saw before, that people are aligned on certain topics. You can align on your strategic choices, you can align on your values, you can align on your purpose. Let's say that you want to make, it's always better to use examples, right? So let's take the diversity example. Let's say you want to bring diversity to the next level within your company, right? The best way to do that is by making sure that people talk about diversity. It's within these conversations that people actually think about it, discuss, change their point of views, and hopefully, they will change their opinions, and they will start making diversity a priority. The role of communication needs to stop being, creating all the outputs about all these videos, which is important, but selectively create what we call internal marketing campaigns. You need to treat your employees as your customers, and if you want your customers to buy diversity, create products that make them want to do it. And this is why when you create content, you need to still create content, but very few selected pieces of content that actually encourage the conversations that you want to have. It can be about strategy, it can be about purpose, it can be about values, you name it. But you need to make sure you create those we call it nudges, right? Because at the end, your goal is to energize and spark all these conversations, right? And we'll show now a video that you'll say, oh, this is very difficult to do and I don't have the resources and all these things. But it's easier than what it seems. You don't need to create fancy videos. Fancy videos are usually a very engaging way, and you can bring emotion so people connect at a different level, right? But you can do roundtables, and again, with the social tools, it's very easy to broadcast a roundtable where you talk about diversity, where you talk about the strategy of your company. And then through the social tool, at the end, you can engage on dialogues with people. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? You can also leverage all the existing materials and just put them into the platform, right? All the employer branding materials, all the purpose materials, all the cultural materials. Again, and it's really good if you can align externally and internally. Let's say you want to boost your belonging to the organization because at the end you believe that through your purpose and by exemplifying your purpose in your company, people will connect better. Leverage external thing, leverage impact stories from your customers, leverage your advertisements outside, put them inside, make sure everybody knows them. This is how you create that bonding, right? And another food for thought that you need to really think about is that don't take HR people or internal communications people to prepare all that content. You have experts within your organization, which are the marketing teams, that can help you create those campaigns, that can help you create that internal content that at the end will boost those conversations and will create those dialogues in the social platforms. Let us show you an example of, again, Decathlon. I think Mickey was mentioning at the beginning about how Decathlon created one specific content video, but here it's very important to focus on the message and see how they communicate.
It'd be easy to do it like everyone else. Make the same stuff, use the same playbook. But where's the fun in that? That's why at Decathlon, we play by different rules. We design, test, and build our own products with the help of pro athletes, weekend warriors, and the kid next door. And before we do anything, we ask ourselves, how can this be better, simpler, stronger, last longer, better for the environment? Once we're sure it's the best it can be, we price it as low as possible. It might not make sense to our competition or our accountants, but it's not about them, and it's not about us. At Decathlon, it's always been about creating the best products at the best prices so that everyone can play. Join the adventure.
So at the end, and going back, what's really important about this video is that see the tone, see the message, see how they're talking about their product, right? It's very easy to see these videos. This is an internal video, obviously, from Decathlon, but you see this video and you understand what a company is going through, right? Low prices, we need to make a difference. Even the tone is very engaging. It's very emotional. So as we do believe that as internal communication, your role is to energize your company, and through videos, through pieces of content like that is how you actually do it. And these pieces of content, if you move them right within your social network, within the company, is where you can actually start generating all those dialogues, and at the end, getting all these strategic, emotional values, purpose alignment to make sure that everybody at the end, in this context of empowerment, actually understands where the business is going and how can themselves, contribute to it and overall energize the company. So let's go into the last bit, which is inviting leaders. At the end, stop for a second and think about it, right? This is a complete change of paradigm. You're at the end trying to get people that were accustomed to receiving top-down information into start sharing, their stories, their thoughts, sometimes even their personal beliefs or how they think about, important matters such as diversity or sustainability or whatever it is that you want to get people to discuss. our experience shows us that there's always a glass ceiling. So it's tough for employees to actually start, pitching in there. We're so accustomed to not do so, to not being asked about our opinions, that when you start asking people, please share what are your intentions in your department, or please share what do you think about this or that, people have a hard time doing it, right? Or what sometimes also happens is that they put relevant content, or they put content in a format that it's not appealing. So, or that even, for example, if you're saying that it's very, very important that every month people understand where we are in terms of business or financial results, it's hard to get the CFO to do this on a regular basis. The key to that is to make sure that leaders buy in, the leaders get in here. Your primary focus as an organization is to make sure that leaders are the first movers here. The leaders actually lead by example. And things that you can do is, and that function really, really well, is you need to align a minimum communications pact. So you go to your CFO and you need to tell him or her, every month by this date, you need to publish A, B, C, and D. And again, as we were saying before, as communications or whoever manages this in your company, you don't need to create that output. You need to make sure, you need to decentralize it. You need to make sure that those people, the ones responsible for those, specific parts of your business, are also the ones responsible to communicate it within the business and make sure that everybody is aligned and everybody actually understands it. Another interesting thing is you can assign topics to what we call internal rock stars. So you might be people that are, again, preferably leaders that have a certain influence within the organization, a certain seniority, and you assign topics to them, such as diversity, and tell them you're going to be the one, driving dialogues within our community about diversity. And you keep pushing. Again, your role, or whoever the person before was creating the content, now is to push, right? To make sure the leaders drive those conversations, right? And it's very, very important. And also these people lead by example. So set the right tone, right? That if you wanna, for example, you've seen the video about Decathlon. It's very joyful, a very vibrant, a very energetic tone, right? So you need to make sure that these people communicate progressively within those lines to set one tone, and then everybody will start following. So again, this is not an easy journey. It completely requires a change of paradigm in terms of, the top-down communication to a social model of organization. But again, if you get leaders to buy in here, the rest of the organization will follow. So for example, in GB Foods, we have today over 90% of people connecting regularly to the platforms. We have, I think it's around 30 to 40% of people regularly posting things. So imagine how communication has boosted here, right? So it's a complete change of paradigm that has an amazing number of benefits, but it's not easy to create. And you need the leading piece, the most important piece here is leaders to pitch in. So at the end, the flow changes, right? So you have internal communications or HR setting the rules of the game, creating specific, nudges that again can be done by the marketing department. We do believe that the role here is more of marketing. Marketing has also to market to your employees, right? You will get all these, we call it here, progressively aligned stories. Little by little, you see the stories will start becoming more relevant in the format you want. You're going to start generating the dialects that you actually want to have around the relevant topics for you as an organization. You put everything and you blend it here in the social tools. We've seen the example of Workplace, but there's plenty more. And at the end of the day, you'll get this energized, empowered, guided organization. We need to do that, right? So all in all, right? Just recapping, and we're going to start having some nice debates now. You need to change or completely change the sender. It doesn't need to be centralized. It needs to be completely decentralized. You need to change the type of message that we've seen in the video from Decathlon. It needs to be strategic in an engaging way, right? In a way that explains the impact that you want to have with your customers, so that people actually connect with your organization and what you're doing. You need to completely rethink the challenge. Stop doing emails for communication. Stop doing newsletters. Even town halls can be really thought. It needs to be more sporadic in our view, more social. And then last but not least, you need to stop, expecting zero feedback from people and actually encouraging people to discuss about things. If you really want to empower people, you need to give people a voice, right? So at the end, we're moving from centralized, limiting communication, to completely decentralized model to energize organization. And the last reflection, I can't remember the name of that man, but the problem with communication is the classic problem of management, right? You don't know what you don't know, right? So you don't know if people are not fully energized. You don't know if people are not fully aligned. But what you do know is that right now, probably you don't have the right systems or right processes in place to get people at their full potential, at their full belonging, at their full alignment, right? So it's important not to assume that people have all these things. And what we encourage you is to, start rethinking your communication model, to start controlling at least the inputs you give to people, and make sure that people, progressively are more aligned, are more linked to your organization, or feel closer to your organization, and at the end, feel more empowered through this new communication model. And that's pretty much it. Thank you very much for the ones listening, and I'm happy to get back in the conversation with Tony and Mickey.
Fantastic, Alex. Thank you very much for sharing. I have like a lot of notes, but I think like that kind of change, and also like it's a bit related of the ambassadors program, no? Like become not just like one channel of communication that is the company. If not everybody involved in the communication can be created that content. And I think while you have like different ideas that I loved, like the one, even like the language we use, no? That sometimes we start using a language to communicate within companies that nobody in the company talks this way, and it seems like it's an external thing that is talking to us, and we have to write in this tone, which when we see, like when you read copywriting tips about how to improve the connection with the people who read your messages, stuff like this, they say like write the way you talk, and that's when we were talking about like attracting talent, we were talking about the same. It's like write job offers the same way people you want to talk, and not use like this jargon. So the same when people are inside the company, you need to talk like a person, so people can relate to the content, to relate to the stories in an emotional way. No, that at the end, what makes us to stay engaged within anything is like the emotion you create and you generate. No, so and my first, in order to throw questions and then like Mickey can give like his 5 cents about the topic as well, would be since you did this, what were like the first steps? Because I guess like you in GB Foods, you were having the an internal communication department, or like HR department doing internal communication. So what were your first steps, like in order to get the leaders buy-in, and in order to repurpose the mission of this department, like the communication department? What was so how did you get the buy-in from leaders in order to start generating content? Because I'm sure like most of them, they didn't generate any content. And second would be what was the role on about this from the people who were like in charge of the internal communication? Because I guess like they had to play a role into this. They didn't just got fired because you like kind of decentralize it, no?
Yes. So it got cut a little bit at the end, but I think I got your question. So at the end of the day, we're still in the transition period, right? And this is a never-ending transition, because there's always more you can do, or you can do actually things better. But at the end of the day, you need to. There was a couple of fears that we had to tackle at the beginning, right? The first one was the fear of over communication, or actually even allowing the full organization to have a platform where to write things that will get across the full organization. So this is something that is scary, I think, for a lot of organizations. So right now, that somebody like me, can actually post something and it all immediately reaches, in our case, over 2,000 people. This is scary, right? Because you start to give power to people, and that generates a sense of fear. But this is, progressively overcome, right? Once you jump into the whole idea and you start embracing it, you start seeing that the benefits are way more, or are bigger than the drawbacks or the risk that you might have, and that people are not stupid, and people don't post stupid things in these things. The biggest barrier is what I tried to share before is around people actually getting that step, and actually posting stuff and getting leaders, especially for people, in relatively older ages where social media is not part of their day-to-day. This is the trick here. This is what's challenging, at least within our organization and other companies that we've seen, which is getting everybody to start commenting. What you need here is push. I mean, there's no other method than actually pushing than getting the highest leaders, starting from the CEO or the top management, in every chance. And this is the role, to me, the new role of communication, right? Instead of creating the content itself, you need to create the environment with the tool, and pushing those leaders in terms of, hey, it doesn't need to be perfect. It's okay. Just post the picture, see what happens. And at the moment that they see that they generate engagement and stuff, and that people respond to that, and that their, let's say, influencing power grows, or that they see other leaders doing it and they get jealous, you start seeing how it how it progressively evolves. But then there's a lot of push, right? There's a lot of nudging from internal communications, HR, or whoever needs to manage. I like to think about it that the role changes, right, from driving the output to being more of a community manager, right? Trying to progress or trying to push the input from happening.
Yeah, and also I think the role, like in interviewing some companies, actually, like I interviewed Luz Rodriguez from Telefonica, and he was saying, like, we went from content creators to content curators. So at the end, like, what they were like doing is what you were saying, like, and like doing conversations,
Correct.
giving it the tools and the elements to people to generate content. And that's what we're doing when they were creating internal communications. We're like curating the content. In their case as well, they were doing it in Facebook Workplace, and they were creating like the best content in order to distribute to everyone. And I will say, like, and then afterwards, about what we were saying about employer brand, you could take that content that had a lot of engagement inside and take it on LinkedIn and also post it to like reach everyone outside as well, in order to attract talent that feels like connected to that. So like this content can be repurposed, but I think like it starts from the inside and start from the leaders. And I think, as you said, like the biggest challenge is to start, because I think people is not used. People have a lot of fears, have a lot of like, oh, what people's gonna think about me, whatever. But I think once you try it and you get like a little bit the habit of it, and you kind of see it that is part of your job, like to create that content, then it's like start moving the wheel, and it goes faster and faster. So yeah, that's like what to encourage people.
Nike goes to your point. Nike. Yeah, no, just to your point, Nike got into a point where they were also trying to migrate the communication style of the organization. And what they did was they appoint informally what they call chief storytellers. And, a group of people around a group of people that whose mission, a part of the day-to-day jobs was also to drive the storytelling of the company. And those people, for example, were specifically taught about stop talking about results and financials and start talking about just do it, and how as a company, we live the just do it mindset, so as to create, a huge amount of engagement with people. So sometimes what you can do is just specifically give to certain people on the organization, people that have a lot to say because of their role, because of their background, because of whatever, the role of chief storytelling officers. And you need to force those people, to start generating that content instead of you, communications, or HR.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you for sharing all this. It was very, very interesting, and I think that I also took some notes, and I felt like a big part of also like the little steps of the framework were focused into one of our biggest pains, in the world of work today, which is how do we create the message, how we then instill it into the employees, how we make it like be directional so that they can just like not just take in the message but also reply to it, interact with it. How do we make it engaging? So I think that these tools are really helpful for that. And tools like Workplace, in our case, in our company, we're implementing Hapio, which is similar to Slack, but it incorporates new stuff like pages. And in these pages, you can basically create a page for each of the teams, and then the team can let the organization know what they're working on, how they're doing versus their KPIs, and who is a member of the team, what are the skills of each member of the team. So it's a way of communicating as well. And so all of these sits very well with me, and I think they're on the right path. And however, if I look from the lenses of my organization, I think that one place where we can still improve, or we can have some margin to do things better, is on the way we allow for people to have a voice in the company's, call it future, call it strategy, call it the type of impact that the company is making. So I think that that's a tricky one, because Of course, you cannot just like open every conversation to everyone and try to reach consensus with a huge organization of like thousands of people for every little thing. But are there some hacks, tactics, things that we could implement so that people towards that ownership, now that we always talk in quiet, people don't actually have a final say on what we're going to do as a company or what direction we're going to take, but people feel like somewhat implicated in the important decisions or in the way they are connected to this impact. I feel like in our organization we still have some room for improvement, and we're shy of 200 people. And with 200 people, you already feel like sometimes you can be disconnected with upstairs. No, any hacks there?
So essentially, I have big doubts here when it comes from in terms of actually getting people to have a big say in strategic choices, because especially when it comes to cross company items, a lot of people don't have, let's say, the full visibility of all the company, right? So I think it's hard sometimes to ask to those people to make a decision or make a suggestion on something that they don't have all the elements of information to be able to make it. However, I do believe, as you were mentioning, right, that it's extremely relevant to gather a lot of input from those people. And from what I've seen and from our experience, so for example, right now we are trying to develop our sustainability strategy. And we have such a diverse number of countries with diverse sustainability issues, and we really, as let's say, managing the global project, don't have the full view of the spectrum, right? And unless we hear from those people, we might make a wrong decision or a wrong assumption. So what you can do is, I think, through these social tools, at the end of the day, you can find ways to involve those people at scale in an easy way, right? You can have, first of all, webinars where you can explain, but you need to be careful with the people you select, right? But you select a handful of people and you get the input from them. But this is probably very time consuming. What you can easily do through these platforms also is launch surveys. You can launch polls, and then people can easily comment, and it gives you very detailed answers on who has responded from where, from what position. So it's easy to get all this, let's say, feedback loops. You can even host, workshops and stuff like that. But then it's if you're trying to get something at the very big scale, you can do it. But I do believe, so for example, also another example is when we define our values, right? So when we define our values, what we said was we wanted to get also to improve the buy-in and make sure that people felt represented in the answer. We hold let's say a big workshop digitally with 160 leaders, and we actually ask them about, how do you feel about this value? How do you feel about that value? How do you feel about that value? And people, gave us a lot of interesting options in an easy way for us to process the information. And then once we came out with a solution, it was, better oriented to their inputs. And at the end, they felt represented. So I think all these platforms, all these social platforms allow you to get, a broader number of people, a bigger chunk of the organization to actually help you with some strategic, very, very strategic decisions.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing this, and I just want to put this out there and to reiterate the fact that I feel like in terms of communication, there's two steps towards reaching impact communication. The first one is going to be about making sure that you communicate well, that you do marketing for your own employees in the sense of like making sure that the message, gets absorbed, and the message that you want to put out there, and then be transparent, have the leadership directly, instead of just HR, have the leaders and the managers be communicating the things that are relevant for people to have the context they need to be successful in their jobs and to be also passionate and motivated. But again, let's also remember that step number 2 is creating the mechanisms or the systems for the people who are in the front lines. And it's easy sometimes to feel like, okay, I have more context, I'm sitting on top, I know more, I founded this thing. I'm on executive team. I know better. So it's very, very easy to fall in this trap. But I think that it's very important for companies moving forward, or the new companies of today, to remember that there needs to be this space for people who are in the front lines and who actually know stuff that we cannot even start to imagine, because they interact with the customers much more than we do, or they encounter the types of little problems on the day-to-day that we cannot even have the capacity to go as deep. So of course you cannot ask everyone, but perhaps when you're taking a big decision, instead of just, I think that the regular thing to do is like, okay, we need to take a big decision, let's gather the executive committee, and then we vote and we decide. How can we bring, as if it was like, imagine there's 5 people in the table, well, there's a 6th one who is just like representing all those front lines, who is, through a mechanism that is able to scale, gather all those inputs, filter them, and provide some information that can be very necessary or can be useful to then take a decision. No? So I think that by doing that, there's a win-win. Well, you have more information to make decisions, and people feel like, okay, it's not like just one more survey, because they need to run surveys, they run surveys, and then they don't do anything with it. It's actually something that they then filter in this way. They take into the executive committees, and then if one of the ideas maybe is selected, or some of the things that were suggested maybe goes forward, well, maybe that person can be informed, and that person can be like, okay, I'm a simple whatever, but I feel like if I want to, I can get involved into the direction that my team or my department or my company is going to take now. So I think that's cool to reiterate how important it is. This.
I fully agree, Amiki, and now we're thinking on what you said. What it's important at the end of the day is probably for a specific project you can have these specific feedback loops, right? What we were saying about creating surveys, polls, workshops, whatever. But what you need to ensure is that, and I think this to these social tools and through this new approach of communication, is that the feedback happens in a let's say in an ongoing basis. So that the people actually in the front lines have the mechanism to constantly and regularly provide feedback on what's going on in the market, right? You need to sort of reinstill, as we were seeing in the communication flow, right? This feedback loop, right? And that this happens in an ongoing basis. And what we're starting to see, at least with us, is that once you start getting, the CEO to be a real person and to post things about, we've decided this, or we've done this, or we've done that, or the CFO to say, look, the results are this, or results are that. When you bring this humanity into the communication process, and people actually have the means to talk to the higher people within your organization, it's way easier to generate these constant feedback loops where actually people, or in a very, very bad way, let's say, well, simple, or people below within the organization have this proximity with people up or higher up in the organization. It's way easier at the end that whenever you're making a strat plan, you consider any opinion or any decision or anything that is really happening in the front line. At the end, it has to be this ongoing landscape of communication going from top to bottom, and again from bottom to top. I think these social tools allow for this.
No, and I totally agree with this, and also like I think the business partners they can work as a connection. So and that should be like they should be in the field all the time in order to get all these inputs and get to know. And also like the same way we communicate with all of you, like we could be communicating as well and asking feedback the same way we say, hey, do you have questions about what we are saying? Do you have like your own personal view? Do you have, we have all these tools right now that you can kind of engage with everybody who's watching. And I'm seeing that a lot of time is what you say, like top-down communication, and people has nothing to say. But now seeing more and more people can comment, people can ask questions, people has the room to do it. The more they see that it's safe to be commenting and to be asking and to be, challenging the CEO or whoever is communicating, I think it's a process. But I've seen this, that the more and more people is at the beginning were like 2-3 comments, but when they see nothing happens and the CEO doesn't take it in the wrong way, and they ask now, like they feel like they can ask anything, and even though they might like or might not like the answer, at least they know. And I think like having this certainty about what's gonna happen or what, and knowing directly in the words of the CEO, I think it drives like this engagement we were saying, and also like you can encourage people to give feedback or to have like ambassadors that they volunteer in order to give feedback, in order to give input, in order to, and it's like at the side of their job, not like within their job. It's not like, okay, I want to work 1 hour more in this project that I know will have impact, and I want to give my input, I want to give my feedback. And I think when you get at this level and they see the impact, as Miki was saying, no, like we ask a lot of polls, we ask a lot of surveys, and people feel it, but they don't have the context of why are you asking me this and what for, and what we're gonna do with all this information. Once you give the context, I think everybody knows on what's working the different teams, and that gives them value, because a lot of times, and now that I'm working with a company that is working with cross-functional teams, and they realize like a lot of times people don't know what, I don't know, marketing is doing or HR is doing or whatever is doing. And sometimes we work for the people on the, I don't know, in retail companies, we work for the people in the front lines, but they don't know anything about what we are doing, what we're working on, and they just know when we launch it, and we didn't even talk to them, and we didn't receive any feedback or any input from them because we didn't thought about involving them. And once you involve them, I think then it's easier to get feedback, to know how to communicate it, to effectively implement whatever you want to implement. And I think it's key. And yeah, so I see this in marketing and UX teams, that they test everything and they make sure that everything is working. But sometimes like we try to do everything and at once, and I think we have to adopt this. So yeah, I think I'm seeing this, no, like more and more companies are worrying about this. So this is good. But as Alex was saying, I think for me, like to wrap up a little bit my part, is that is a process. You need to start encouraging people to create content, not creating it yourself. So encourage, gather stories, give ideas to what we can be communicating that it might be relevant, and try to start like moving the wheel or spinning the wheel so people get more involved. And then people, just of fear of missing out, they will be posting as well, and and we will start engaging and having like more of these conversations that Alex was presenting. That's my takeaway for today as well.
If I can add one last thing, we focused also like on kind of like top-down communication, then bottom-up. And there's one part that I realized in working in several organizations that is key to get right and difficult to get right at the same time. It's how teams communicate laterally. And it's important to define the interdependencies between different teams. Mm-hmm. And once you spot those interdependencies, you got to create the system for these teams to connect. And not just to talk about, it's good to invest not just on when they need each other, so that they talk when they need each other. That's the first step, that is great. But then there's a second step where they just like create these bonds, and you create those highways for communication to happen also more informally, so that those relationships outside of your own team are developed, are strong, so that whenever they need each other, it's very easy for them to communicate easily. No? So I think that that lateral or that informal communication with teams that are interdependent between each other is another one that it's important.
And I will say and also to segment information and explain the projects based on the people you're communicating. It's not the same way to communicate one project to people who are in the front lines, to the IT department or the sales department, because they might be interested in different parts, or the output that we're expecting will be different from all of them. And you cannot be communicating one thing for everybody, because that is not relevant for anyone. And you have to, okay, this how it's going to be communicated to these teams. Okay, the most important thing for them is this. So we craft the message, and we can craft it with them in order to be relevant to that public. And the same way we do with with the people in the front lines. So what is the most important part of this project for them? So, and I think that what Alex was saying, like giving nudges and specific ones, and I think doing with different targets and with different segmentations is key as well. Alex, your final thoughts about?
Completely agree. And just to make his point, Sorry, I think there was a little bit of bad connection here. Yeah, no, my final point isn't precisely this one. That essentially this is not a small thing. This is not a tool thing. This is not a specific change, right? You need to completely redesign the way you think about communication in your company, allowing, as Mickey was saying, now this peer-to-peering, allowing the top-down and making all the bottom-up. So it requires a complete rethinking within the organization, right? But we do believe that within the future of work, this type of communication is the only one that is going to be effective within companies, right? In a world where people will work remotely, in a world based on empowerment, in a world where people want to connect, you need to completely redesign, communication within the companies, and you need to embrace what we like to call here impact communication. So we strongly encourage companies to start experimenting with this, because it's absolutely key today, and it will be even more important tomorrow.
Fantastic. So, and again, like, just to remember, as you know, thank you, Alex, thank you, Mickey, thank you all of you. So, as you know, you can have like this talk in a written version if you subscribe to our newsletter. You can do it in getquiet.com, or if you subscribe, like, the only emails we'll send to you will be the next talk and a written summary of the talk, and then you can see as well the written summaries of all the Quiet Masterclasses we've been doing, like, along the framework. And also in our YouTube channel, you can see all the past Quiet Masterclass. So we invite you to be part of this community, and also, like, we'll try to get you engaged. Any comment, any questions, anytime, you can write us on YouTube or on LinkedIn, or you can reach directly to us. I will be super happy to have your input or your questions. So yeah, I'm just wanted to say thank you to everyone. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Mickey, and see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, everyone. See you soon.